Hey there everyone, it's Michael Gilmore here from Whizbang's blog, and it's really good to have you here with me once again as we take a look at the impact of COVID-19 on the domain monetization industry. And a few comments I'd like to say about what I've seen this week occur, just as a broad overview, and that is, it looks like things are swinging around again and heading in an upward direction, so that's all great news. All great news for domain investors. The other thing I plan on doing in this particular segment is a couple of things a little bit different to the previous ones I've done on this topic. Number one is I've renamed it the Domain Industry Update, Week 9. Why? Because I'm finding I'm getting a lot of good feedback, and people are saying, look, there's such great, valuable information here that you're releasing to the industry that they've just never seen before of what's actually happening out there in domain monetization. And so by releasing it on an ongoing basis, I think people are beginning to really sort of see of what's going on in the industry and how they can actually benefit from it for their own businesses. The second thing I plan on doing is, in this particular episode, is I've taken a case study. So it's from about mid-April to now, and what's actually happened of a new client, say, coming onto ParkLogic, what's occurred to their domains, and I'm going to begin to unpack that. And I think that should be really beneficial to be able to get a glimpse of what's occurring in comparison to other baselines of data. But anyway, without further ado, what I'm going to do is I'll flip across here to the system so we can see what's going on with the Domain Industry Update, Week 9. Okay then, Week 9, and if we go to the next slide. There it is there. Okay, normalized RPM and RPM trends. If we're to take a look at the normalized RPM, you can see that normalized RPM has been going up and down here across this period, went down, then it came back up with a vengeance, and then it's dropped down, but slowly beginning to trend upwards. And likewise, the RPM has gone up as well. We've been seeing that is that don't be confused by the third level polynomial trend line there for the blue line. It's actually not going down. It's swinging around upwards. Which is great news once again. So let's take a look at the next thing that's going on here is EPCs and CTR. I actually added a trend line to both these, and one of the things you'll notice is that for every little bit that the EPC goes up, the CTR goes down, which if you really think about that, that is just ridiculous. So what we're saying is that as users click, advertisers pay less. That doesn't seem to make sense unless there's some sort of manipulation behind the scenes, and the biggest advertiser in the industry, or advertising network in the industry, obviously Google, has a strong influence on these numbers. It's just it's an artifact of, if you ask me, of smart pricing, which Google has, that for every up there's a counter-cyclical down, which is just one of those strange things. It'll be interesting to see, because they're about to meet, it looks like, coming up, and whether they'll just flick over and go the other way. But let's see what else we got. So Volatility Index. Remember, anything in the red means there's contraction. Anything in the green, there's expansion. Oh, it looks like I've got my red line just, red area just out by a little bit. So don't get confused by that. It's down a bit further. So essentially what that means is the industry is now basically, other than that one little spike there at the end, the industry is basically static. It's neither expanding or contracting. After the initial surge, just here, there's a massive rapid expansion. That got eroded away, all that upward momentum, got eroded away until finally we're now basically level. So it's about the same as before, which when you think about it, that is phenomenal, because we know from press releases with large corporations that they've actually taken away their advertising, the Amazons, the Walmarts, and so forth like that. They've stopped advertising online, and there's a lot of corporates that have done that because of COVID, and so someone's had to step into that gap. I personally would be a strong proponent, I think, of saying it's a small to medium enterprises where they're just looking to get some business from somewhere. If you think about this, even if you're running a coffee shop and you're trying to get people to at least order takeaway coffee, because they're allowed to do that in many places. If you want to get people to order takeaway coffee, you've got to somehow take the orders. Or you've got to be able to, if you're trying to sell some like lunch takeaway lunch meals and you're running a sandwich store, then quite a number of those sort of businesses have gone online. What we don't know is whether a lot of those businesses will end up staying online. And what's going to happen to the RPM trends and so forth like that moving forward as the big corporates come back online to the market, demanding more traffic. And then if you really think about it further, there'll be less traffic because people will be going back to work again and not working from home. And so there will be a decline in traffic. There'll be more demand for that traffic, which then should push up the earnings per click and so forth like that. So it'll be interesting to see what's happening with that counter-cyclical nature of CTR and EPC. But anyway, okay, so what's happening with direct advertisers and also Google? Google is definitely dominating, like beyond a doubt. It's definitely dominating, and you can see there it's up to 70%, or just below 70% of the traffic. And you can see there's been a trend upwards from 60 back in mid-January. Even the lowest point there for Google, which is the blue line, around about 58% of the traffic. Now it's sitting at like 68%, which is a big increase. And that increase has come at the expense of direct advertisers. But I wouldn't be surprised if we see the direct advertisers come back into the market with a vengeance. Many of them have left, particularly one of the biggest segments that have been exposed to COVID-19 has been the travel industry. I saw a figure the other day that there's been 97% less airfare sold in the travel industry during this period of time. And 97% is a big number. It's basically saying the industry shut down. That's essentially what it's saying. So I think that out of all the industries online, one of the ones that really had an incredible amount of momentum in the online advertising, in affiliate programs, and all that sort of stuff, it was the travel industry. So I wonder whether that dip of 10% just there, it's largely been the loss of industries like the travel industry. So it'll be interesting to see what happens when hopefully we all come out of lockdown in the not too distant future. Okay, so what's going on with the separation of the normalized RPM for Google versus direct advertisers? Now you can see Google is slowly trending up. That's the blue line towards the end just here. It's trending upwards. And we can also see there is that the direct advertisers really begin surging back. Like I said, it'll be interesting to see how that ends up looking across the coming weeks. I think it's going to continue to expand. But then, once again, one of the things that I got some great feedback on was the fact that with a chart like this from the beginning of the year to now, that's great, and you can see the overall picture, but zoom in a little bit. And so I zoomed in. Remember last week, I zoomed in and said, okay, let's just take a look at it from mid-April to now. And you can see there is a low point around about towards the end of April, just here in the chart, right there, and then it's surging back upwards. Both of them, in fact, red is obviously the direct advertisers and blue is the Google. And there is definitely a trend upwards for them both. Now, the other chart, which I got a lot of feedback on, was this one. This is direct advertisers and Google on the same scale. So if you look at that blue line there, that blue line is what Google pays out. The red line is what direct advertisers pay out. So that, I think, puts things into perspective. Is that you may say, well, why is the direct advertisers only winning a small amount of the traffic? Where they do win, they win big, which is great, and certain market verticals and so forth. But the reason why Google wins so well and why Google's so good at what it does, it has enormous breadth of advertising. So all those weird things like Auntie May's knitting needles, and there'll be an advert for in Google, but there may not necessarily be an advert in direct advertising. Yeah, so direct advertisers. So, but it's a great thing to see. You can definitely see at the end there that both Google and the direct advertisers are really heading in an upward direction. So maybe we're back to come for another expansion phase. It's something which I know I'm looking forward to. So what's happened to volatility? Once again, I think it's because I changed PCs compared to when I did this chart. Be wary of the red line. The red lines actually should be down around here where I'm indicating with my cursor. So I do apologize for that. So it should be downwards. But which means basically they're static other than that one spike for direct advertisers. And Google, for Google, my apologies. For direct advertisers, going up and coming back. But so they've been through a bit of an expansion phase, and we saw that with a surge, a quite large surge in the normalized RPM payout rates. But once again, direct advertisers, they're going to come back or continue to go forward. We'll see that in the coming weeks. So let's take a look at a case study. This is an interesting thing that I was going through with the client. Obviously, I can't tell you who the client is. That would be bad. But it's interesting data. The client's doing had a baseline about $190 per day in revenue, and so we want to look at during this period of time what has actually went on with the optimization process. And there's the revenue trend line right there. So you can see the revenue trend line is continuing to accelerate upwards. In fact, I have a new data point from when I first did this chart. It should be up about here. It's actually, sorry, my apologies, up about here, which is quite high. Yeah, so the trend line is definitely picking up. And I think it's off the back of the surge in normalized RPMs that we saw for direct advertisers and Google, which is occurring at the moment. The CTR and EPC trends, what more can I say? Clearly, they're inverse, bit bumpy in the EPs in the CTR, but I don't know why we put that in there. In many respects, I find it's almost pointless having that there. But let's take a look what's going on with views and URLs. So if we're to look at the URLs is the blue line. It's essentially flat. But the views is the red line. And the views have been accelerating upwards. Now, one of the reasons for this is that through the optimization process, we not only optimize revenue, but we also optimize where the views are recognized. So let's imagine we sent 100 pieces of traffic, say, to a parking provider, and they said, we think there's only 20 views here. The reason why they said 20 views is because their filters knocked out 80. And that's quite common. So the filter said, we don't like these 80 views. But in that 80 views, which they're knocking out, there may be a whole lot of false positives. And so we may send those 80 views to, say, another provider, and they say, of those 80 views, we actually think 10 of them are actually pretty good. They're real humans and so forth. So it has an opportunity to be monetized. So then we send, say, the remainder 70 to, say, some of the direct advertising networks, and they go along and they go, you know what, we like 30 of these. But then the rest is junk traffic, which can be quite common. So rather than if you had everything going to one packing company and 80 is thrown away, you now have it being split up going everywhere, and 50 are recognized as good versus the original 20. So that's a real bonus just there of the optimization process. And you can see on this chart is that's exactly what's happened, is that we found more and more homes for the views. And it's all because of the whole thing around false positives and so forth, that many companies may get their filters incorrect. So what's going on then with the RPM and normalized RPM? This is once again, interesting chart. You can see that the RPM is the red one. And the reason why it sort of went down is because it's being depressed artificially by the increase in views. So don't get confused by that. So as views have gone up, this artificially forces RPM down, but you can see when it got to its lowest point, it's then beginning to trend back up again. So the line that we look at the most internally with PackLogic, for instance, is the normalized RPM, which I spoke a lot about. And the normalized RPM is just trending upwards. And that's a great curve. We like those sort of curves, and clients like them even more. It's interesting, this particular client, I was talking to them, and they're ecstatic with the numbers. And so let's take a look at this. Now, this is something which is so important to be able to understand what this chart actually means. So let me explain it as best I can anyway. So what this chart gives a picture of the performance of the domain portfolio by comparing it versus the baseline traffic. So in other words, if I look at this particular column here where it says greater than 80%, what it's saying is that for domains that have at least 80% of the baseline traffic, at least 80% of the baseline traffic, how did it perform? So, and then we look at the green box there, and it's 178%. So for domains that had at least 80% of the baseline traffic, they're performing at 178% of the baseline. So if the baseline was doing $100, it's now doing $178. And by the way, if they had greater than 100%, in other words, a lot more traffic, then it'd be 222% of the baseline traffic. See, what a lot of people do is they look at way down the bottom left-hand end, and they say, oh, there's only been a 4% increase in the revenue. But that's not a measurement of performance. It's an odd measurement of performance because a lot of the domains didn't have any traffic. So how can you possibly optimize them? Could be they've lost their links. It could be that they're educational domains. There's no education advertising now. Or it could be that there is travel-related domains. The bottom's fallen out of that market, that's for sure. So it's not a true representation of whether the optimization is working or not. What is a true representation of where optimization is working is up around the 80% level. So at 80%, the level, it means it's comparing apples with apples, same levels of traffic. So if there is the same levels of traffic for the baseline compared to the last week's data, then it's a 78% increase in revenue, or 178% increase on the baseline. Now, you can see that in a graphical format just below, where blue is actually the PackLogic performance at those levels, and the red is the baseline performance for those different bands of traffic. Yeah, so what it clearly shows is performance. Is that if you do optimization through a system like, dare I say, like PackLogic, then you get an incredible uplift in revenue. And that's why a lot of our clients are very happy to buy the people's portfolios, because they put them into the system. They end up getting, rather than paying back in 2 years, it's now paid back in 12 months, the return on the investment. Yeah, so it's a very good picture of performance. And for likewise, this particular test for a very large client we're dealing with, they're overjoyed by these numbers, because the numbers really said, and by the way, I think the numbers will sit at about probably close to doubling their revenue line ultimately, because let's face it, any domains down this end which don't have any traffic, you just drop. You just get rid of those because they just don't perform. They're not good performers and things like that. So you probably get rid of those domains. They have no traffic. Let's get rid of them. There may be the odd domain in there, I guess the weird click or something, but you may keep. But other than that, you just drop those domains. Yeah, so it gives a very clear picture of performance. Yeah, so I hope you found that was interesting. Looking at this is real data that we looked at then for a customer, and like I said, I can't tell you who they are, obviously, but it's real data, and it's, in fact, I was just going through with it this morning with them, and I think that there's some really good things you can unpack, and there's a lot of stuff. I think that there's a video I did just recently, which I haven't actually launched just yet here on my blog, which is what makes ParkLogic different. It's looking at the data in these sort of fashions, because you're trying to ascertain performance. And ultimately what we're trying to get to is not just increasing revenue, but increasing profit. Because profit's the only thing that sticks to your pockets. Everything else is smoke and mirrors. Anyone can increase revenue, just buy more domains, get more traffic, and away you go. That's a simple thing. But if you buy like 1 million domains, you may not be getting a substantial profit from that. So you've got to be wise about that. But anyway, so that's a glimpse. And like I said, we'll be taking a look at this more as a domain industry report now, rather than just focus on COVID. I hope you enjoyed this, and I look forward to seeing you next week. I hope you enjoyed that video and you find them really valuable for your business and helping you make better decisions. Don't forget to like, subscribe, or pass the video on to your friends. Anyway, thanks a lot for that. Have a great day. Bye.